Come on, won't you let me ride? My clothes have holes and the weatherman lied. The wind's so cold, I think I might die. Gotta get to Winnemucca before daylight. Get to Winnemucca before daylight.
Hey, how's it going? Welcome to Tell You What, the podcast. We talk with musicians about songwriting and music making. My name is Mike. Today we sit down with Idaho songwriter and musician Eilen Jewell. Eilen's recent excellent record, Get Behind the Wheel, was the featured topic, but we covered a lot of other ground as well. I'd like to first point out, we recorded this about a month or so ago, and Eilen mentions her record release anxiety and her hopes that the record, quote, does well. Well, I just checked, and her album is currently resting comfortably near the top of the latest Americana charts, so I think she can relax about that. Eilen has had an interesting path as a musician. As we hear, when she was younger, she was quite shy about performing. Particularly telling is the anecdote about her favorite day of the year being the day after her annual piano recital, when she knew she didn't have to perform again for another year. Quite a trip to the artist she is today, known for her live performances, and Eilen talks about the personal connection she's in search of when she performs. Eilen has also been on quite a journey over just the last few years. She went through a divorce from her husband, who also happened to be her drummer and her manager. She also faced the untimely deaths of some close friends and family members. Throw COVID quarantine on top of that, and Eilen found herself in a bad place. In our discussion, Eilen was extremely generous with her thoughts on this very personal journey. She shares her experiences with meditation and her use of psychedelics, which she credits with bringing her back from that dark place. I am grateful to Eilen for sharing her thoughts on that time of her life, as many of the great songs on this record are a product of those struggles. Talking in depth about her songs is not something Eilen was previously comfortable doing, but for this batch of very personal songs, she has found her way to opening up a bit about them, and it made for a great conversation. So check out Eilen's record, Get Behind the Wheel, and look for her coming to play in your town. Eilen will be happy to say hello to you after the show. Big thanks to Allison Mahal at IVPR for getting Eilen's music in front of me and for making this interview happen. Very much appreciated. And now, please enjoy this Tell You What discussion with Eilen Jewell.
Just plug me into your neon sign. I wanna blast my love, let it amplify. Blast my love, let it amplify.
All right, Eilen Jewell, welcome to Tell You What, the podcast. Thanks so much for taking the time to join us today.
Thanks for having me.
Sure thing. You're coming to us from your home in Idaho. Do I have that right?
That's right, yeah. Boise.
Boise, Idaho.
Yeah.
So about 2 weeks ago, your newest record, Get Behind the Wheel, was released, right? Mm-hmm. Record release time. You've done this before. You've released some records before. Does it feel any different this time, or is it always the same? Is there a sense of relief, excitement to get these songs out there?
Kind of a mixed bag. It's like this feeling of, there's fear in it, like, oh, I hope this does well. What if it doesn't? But there's also a lot of like just joy and gratitude in it, especially this time. I feel like with this album, all of my kind of usual emotions and just my mixed bag of neuroses was amplified. Everything just kind of felt more intense. I think because there was a time there in the pandemic when I just wasn't even sure if I'd ever make another album again. So it kind of felt more intense, more fraught.
Yeah. Well, we're going to get into some of that intensity a little later when we talk about the songs. But for now, let's go back in time a bit, talk about your early years. What kind of music was around your home or community, maybe that shows up in what you're creating today? You did grow up in Idaho. as well?
Yeah, I did.
Yeah.
I grew up in Boise. My family, no one in my family is a musician per se, but both of my parents are music lovers. And, they didn't have a lot of music like being played in the background that I remember.
Yeah.
But when a song came on the radio and that they really loved, I remember both of my parents, like separately. I have kind of early memories of them getting really happy. And I think that's something that's always fascinated me from a really young age, is the way that music has that ability to change people's moods instantly. The way that if a song comes on, that someone really loves, they light up.
Yeah.
And I've really been drawn to the way that music affects people. And yeah.
So what was the first music that you remember having that effect on you?
Definitely music from the 50s and 60s.
Yeah.
Like Jerry Lee Lewis, Great Balls of Fire, was one of the earliest ones. And, that movie Stand By Me that came out in the 80s, that soundtrack, I think of it and I just get so happy. Everything in there.
That's great. So when did you start making music yourself? Did you pick up an instrument? Were you always singing, or how did it really start?
Yeah, I was always singing. I remember writing my first song when I was probably in, first grade.
Mm-hmm.
The one that I think that I remember the most clearly, I was in second or third grade, and my dog died, and my first instinct was to write a song about it. And I remember writing, or I didn't write it down, but I came up with it in my head, and I walked around the playground of my elementary school just singing it to myself, sadly. And it made me feel so much better. It was a sad song to comfort myself with. So it's always been like a survival mechanism for me.
Yeah, that's like the scene in the movie, the foreshadowing scene where the child tells its own future. You turn to songwriting the first time you needed it.
Yeah. It's interesting how it's just kind of in my blood to do that. And I didn't see anyone doing that. It's just, because since my parents don't write songs, and I just thought, I don't know what I thought. It just happened.
Yeah. And did you pick up was it the guitar, your first instrument, or piano, or?
That was the piano. I got it in my head that I wanted to play the piano exactly like Beethoven. So I told my parents that I just had to take piano lessons. So I did that from age 7 to about 18.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
So you did end up playing some Beethoven, I'm guessing.
I played some. I never... You might be shocked to learn this, but I did not learn to play exactly like Beethoven. But I consider it my first love, my first musical love. And then the guitar came later at age about 15 or so.
And when you were playing the piano when you were younger, were you writing songs right from the outset at the piano, or did that kind of work its way back later?
That kind of came later. I wrote a few songs in my teens, but then it kind of went away and then came back more when I was in my 20s. I thought I'd try it again. And when I was a kid, it was like the ideas just came so freely. I think I just didn't have the self-editing mechanism in place yet. It was just I was writing all the time, about popsicles, I remember, and Santa Claus and the Easter Bunny, and then I got self-critical, throughout my
popsicles?
Teens. Oh, yeah.
Do you know the popsicle song?
Well, it's not very original because I just stole basically the melody of Lollipop.
Change it to popsicle.
Popsicle. Oh, yeah. Pop, a pop, a pop.
I like it.
Yeah. It's pretty catchy.
So you weren't writing songs until your 20s, but were you playing the guitar or playing the piano as a performer before then?
Well, I was, I would play the piano when forced to in front of other people. I had to do an annual piano recital that I dreaded all year long. I used to say that my favorite day of the year was the day after the piano recital because I had 364 more days before I had to do another one.
Wow.
I never thought I would willingly get up in front of people and perform. That was
Interesting.
not something I was interested in at all. And I really am not sure what happened there. I think it was kind of this gradual evolution where the guitar, I learned the guitar because I really loved singing and I didn't want to just sing with no instrumentation behind me. So the guitar was portable, and my friend and I liked to go, out and about, like, I don't know, backpacking or to the river, and we just like sing songs when we went places. So I kind of learned the guitar in order to have a way to accompany myself singing, and my friend too, and then kind of one thing led to another, and I met this other friend in college who was really into busking and, like street performing. So he got me into the Santa Fe Farmers Market, and I started doing busking there. And that's when I started noticing that sometimes when I sang with this friend, and people would hear, their faces would light up and they'd get really happy, and they'd bring us little gifts. They'd leave things in my guitar case like jams and jellies and loaves of bread. And so I was like, wow, this is something that people really enjoy. And
Did you dread the day before going to the farmer's market, that feeling of the recital, or was that just a different feeling altogether?
it was totally different because with busking, people it wasn't a captive audience, so it wasn't nearly as intimidating. People would just, if they wanted to listen, they'd stop, and then they'd be appreciative usually, and then those who weren't interested would just keep walking. So it was this very casual experience that didn't give me the jitters at all, and it was all very friendly. I didn't.
And you're playing cover songs at this point.
Yeah, mostly like old bluegrass songs, some folk songs, and then I think it wasn't until I decided to keep busking in Venice Beach that I think I started doing a couple originals. And
eventually you got up on a real stage.
Yeah, that came later. Let's see. So I think the first time I was on a real stage willingly was maybe '03, and that was in the Northeast. I moved to Great Barrington, Massachusetts, in the Berkshires, and there's a great music venue there called Club Helsinki, and I would do their open mic sometimes, which kind of seemed like another good transition from busking to a real stage.
Yes.
And it was nerve-wracking, but I was with other people who felt equally nervous, and it's kind of similar, like people weren't paying attention too closely, so
they're just waiting for their turn mostly.
Yeah, exactly. So I did that, and then somebody at Club Helsinki heard me at the open mic and asked if I wanted to open for Jeff Moldar. And that was kind of what launched everything, really, because then I got a taste for what a real show is like, and realized that I could kind of work through the jitters and even learn to work with them.
Yeah. So you're starting to write more songs at this point.
Yeah.
At what point did you start to think of yourself as a songwriter and someone whose vocation it is to write music and play it or have people hear it?
I think it started right around that time, like right around when I opened for Jeff Moldar at Club Helsinki, and I was starting to feel really a lot of discontent with where I was in life. I was working for a photographer who was really passionate about his art, and I was like, I'm just like, it was a fun job, and I loved his art, but I was like, I want to be doing my own art. That's
Right.
I want to be slaving away for something that is like my passion. And so that's why I moved to Boston from the Berkshires to get serious about becoming a songwriter and a performer. And yes, that's when I really started writing songs, I think.
Yeah. Well, let's talk about that songwriting process a bit. I know there's probably not one particular way, but how generally are your songs coming together? Do you try to have a regular or daily writing practice? Do you wait for inspiration, or maybe wait for the pressure of working towards a recording session?
I definitely do not have a daily practice. I'm not a very disciplined person.
Mm-hmm.
I like to do things only when the inspiration strikes or when I absolutely have to. So deadlines work really well for me.
Okay.
Yeah, it's a combination of inspiration and deadlines that get me going. But then as far as like what inspires me, that, or like the actual process itself of each song, it's really pretty different. You know, sometimes it'll just start with an idea, like I want a song that's like this. And I'll have like a vision of how the whole song will be in my head. But then other times it's like, I just really like this phrase, and I just want a song with this phrase in it.
Let's back up to that vision for a second. When you say you have a vision of a song in your head, is there a melody? Is there a concept? Is there a structure? What parts are contained in that vision?
It's more like a concept. Like,
yeah.
Wouldn't it be great if I had a song that had this as its overarching kind of concept? But sometimes there's a melody with no words. Sometimes there's words with no melody. Sometimes they both come together and it's like totally intact. Like I just have to tune my antenna to a certain station, and there the whole thing is.
Right.
And others come really, it's very painstaking and laborious, and like I'll write one line a year or something for 10 years.
Right. Yeah, that's what I was going to ask. So you have works in progress of different songs all at the same time. You're not like working on one thing start to finish.
Yeah, it's more chaotic than that. It's like scraps on various pages in various notebooks, and then sometimes I'll go back through and piece them together. Yeah. And
is the guitar your primary writing instrument? Are you still going back to the piano?
I've never actually written on the piano. It's just the guitar.
Yeah.
The piano for me is more like, it's more of a classical instrument. I'd like to get into like learning how to improvise on piano, but mostly it's like sheet music and kind of a different part of the musical brain for me.
So I imagine you're collecting ideas all the time, even when you don't think you're writing songs. Is there anything you find brings the ideas out, or anything you do to bring the ideas out? Some people talk about driving or walking or gardening, things like that.
That's a good question. What does bring the ideas out? I think they either just come or don't come. But sometimes if I really am in the mood for like writing a song, I'll just go somewhere, like just out of town. It's not necessarily the driving or like any particular activity once I get out of town, but maybe it's just the quality of being sort of anonymous and away from the obligations of home. Yeah. That kind of creates a blank slate.
Speaking of getting out of town, you have done a lot of touring over the years. Let's talk about maybe what you've learned from that. Two-part question. You can take either part of this or both. First part, what is important to you when you're performing live? What are you trying to bring to the audience? Second part, do you feel that all this touring and live performing somehow feeds back into your creative process in some way in terms of the song ideas or maybe how you approach developing your songs?
So what's important to me when I'm performing?
Yes.
For me, I think the main thing is that magic that I was talking about, where I can see that the music is making people feel something. You know, that kind of like transformative magic that music has. When I can see that look on people's faces while I'm performing, and have that give and take with the audience, where they just seem really happy to be there in some way, even if it's a sad song, and you know, or maybe even especially with a sad song, that appreciation that they show. It's not, I don't really think of it as being for me. I feel like we're creating something together when an audience and I are in sync with each other. So that's kind of mainly what I look for, is that give and take. Yeah. And then it continues after the show. I like to do a meet and greet with the audience after every show, and that has proven to be a really important part of the experience for me, because that's a give and take too. You know, they come up and they say sometimes like what a particular song means to them, or how my music has affected their lives, and I just think like, wow, I feel bad sometimes for people who can't or don't want to do that meet and greet after, because you miss out on that. It's not the same as reading it, you know, in the comments section on Facebook or whatever, or on YouTube. It's like a real, feels like a real exchange, you know?
Yes. I tell you, I think that more performers should do what you're talking about, because from a audience member or listener's perspective, to have even a 10 or 15 or 30-second interaction with the artist who's creating the music changes that person's relationship to the music. Even if it's a brief exchange, their brain now processes, I think, the way I feel about it, their brain processes that music differently in the future, because they feel they've made this connection with the artist.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, totally. I feel that I've been on that side of it too, you know, from the audience member's perspective. Yeah, now there's something even a little more personal about the music, even if it's a short interaction. And for me as a performer, I just love having the opportunity to genuinely thank people for coming. Like, if they didn't come, it would have been a failure of a night. But they came, they made all the difference, you know. And so I want to actually say thank you. And sometimes that's all it is. It's just, hey, good show. Hey, thanks for coming. But even that is like, it feels really important to me. So
that makes a difference. Let's talk about this excellent album, Get Behind the Wheel, just out 2 weeks ago as we record this. You kind of alluded to this earlier, but these are very personal songs. You've been through some stuff, and that stuff is in these songs. So is this batch of songs more personal than what you've written, or maybe what you've released previously in your career?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, this is by far the most personal collection of songs. I tended to shy away from writing about anything too autobiographical before. I'm not sure why. I mean, it wasn't on purpose, but I guess I kind of liked to weave fiction and autobiography like into each song, so that it was kind of a kaleidoscope. In the past. But this album was like, I don't know, I didn't really necessarily set out to write like, this is going to be about my experience, but that's what kept happening. Every song pretty much was taken from things that I had, that were like up for me, that were near and dear to my heart at the time.
Did you find you were hesitating to do it along the way, or was it just a natural progression?
It was natural. I guess part of me did hesitate a bit around some of the songs, because my now ex-husband is in the band with me. You know, I want to be respectful towards him, but then, you know, so some of them are about him. You know, there's some awkwardness there. But he's been really great about taking the time to say, yes, this is awkward, but I'm okay with this, and, you know, the songs are your art, and I still want to be part of your art, and we get along really well together still, and we work really well together. So yeah, so the only difficulty really has been in kind of performing them with him, and of course he recorded them with me too. So
right,
but he's ready to like start this new chapter of our relationship, and so am I, and so far so good.
That's great.
Yeah.
Now, you had talked about previously you didn't write about these personal experiences, you weave fiction in, but in terms of point of view, were you writing from a character's perspective or about a character, or did you present them in the first person? It was just this interlacing of fiction and real story.
Yeah, they tended to be using the first person, but the first person was not necessarily me.
Right. Yeah.
Just trying to throw people off my trail, you know?
Yeah. Well, I've tracked you down, so it's all over now.
Yeah.
I find it interesting to talk with artists about their relationships to the songs that they put out there and how they feel about them personally. I read an interview where you said previous to this record, you didn't necessarily talk too much about the songs, about their origin stories. Has that changed with this batch of songs, your willingness to talk a bit more about the songs themselves?
Yeah, I'm more willing to talk about them now. I think, I still kind of butt up against some unknowns, and at some point, like, language sort of breaks down for me. I can say, here's what I was thinking when I wrote this song, or where I was at in my personal life, but then, it's kind of hard to really say, like, so there's a song called Crooked River on my new album, and so people will ask, like, so what is Crooked River to you? And it's like, there's so many different ways to answer that. There's so many layers. Like, well, it's an actual, literal, physical place that I went to a lot while I was suffering through a lot of this stuff, in the past few years. But then on the other hand, it's a metaphor, and it's also like, I don't know, man, I just kind of like the way those words sound together.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of different ways to talk about music, and I think that was my reticence in the past, was because, it's like I just get overwhelmed. It's like there's just too many things to say, so I'll say nothing.
Yeah. Well, also maybe you want the listener to have his own story with their song.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah. You brought up Crooked River. You actually already half answered the question I was going to ask. But we can talk about it a little more. The idea of the sense of place in your music, in terms of where you are writing, like the physical place you live in and your surroundings, how that influences your music, but also maybe you can talk about how you bring place into particular songs. In this instance, this place, Crooked River.
I draw a lot of inspiration from the West in general, but Idaho especially. There's just something about the West that has always really spoken to me, the wide open spaces and the big skies. And, I guess I'm an Americana artist through and through. I like writing about trains and
yeah,
and desert scapes and
rivers.
Yeah, rivers. And so that's the slice of Americana that really speaks to me, I guess. Yeah, and then like all the emotions that surround those images, like there's like a loneliness and a heart sickness that come up when you think about landscapes like that. They're evocative,
And when I finally get myself together, well, I know, yes, I know it'll be sublime. But until then, I'll make my home down by Crooked River, and I'll sleep beneath the shade of the pine.
So let's go big picture again for a minute. You have been on the personal journey that's reflected in this collections of songs. You already alluded to some of this. You went through a divorce, experienced loss of some loved ones. There's, of course, quarantine. Now you've come out the other side, now engaged, I understand, by the way, right?
Yeah.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
And you got this amazing record. As part of all of this, you went through a discovery process, a personal, spiritual, if I can use that word, process. You worked on a meditation practice, I understand, practicing mindfulness. I believe you also had some experiences with psychedelics.
Mm-hmm.
So can you talk about how these changes, this work you did, made its way into your creative practice? And did you find your songwriting process different as a result of, say, the psychedelic experience or your meditation practice, and maybe in what ways?
Yeah. Let's see. How did those affect my songwriting? I mean, I think mainly they kept me sane.
Yeah.
So they got me through a really, really difficult time in my life. Like everything happened at once, and I realized that I had no coping mechanisms other than like drinking, basically. And I realized pretty quickly that was not going to help at all, and it was going to make things worse. And so I started looking for other ways to deal. And luckily I'd always been curious about mindfulness meditation anyway. So it was pretty easy. It was like, well, this is it. This is like the excuse that I've been looking for to get into this. And I got connected with a Dharma teacher right away who helped me learn to meditate. And I think that if it weren't for meditation, and then a little bit after meditation came psilocybin journeys, I think that I don't know where I'd be. I don't, possibly not even alive. I don't know. Because it was that difficult of a time for me. And I think partly because of like the attitudes that I grew up with, and always being on the road in my 20s and 30s, I didn't learn healthy habits of like how to cope with my strong emotions, and a lot of like chemical habits or addictions are just ways of regulating emotions, and I'm starting to realize, oh yeah, I crave a drink more when I'm feeling these ways. And before, I guess I never even put that together. It was just, I don't know, this is what I do because I'm a touring musician,
Right.
And I've always struggled a bit with anxiety, and just kind of chalked that up to, oh well, I just have a stressful life, and didn't really do much about it. But when I went through these personal losses, some deaths in the family and of friends, right around that time, I also had to start touring again, but we were still kind of in the pandemic. So it was this like perfect storm of anxiety and stress. And I got a prescription for Zoloft, and I tried so hard to make that work. I really wanted to not be in a full-blown panic attack all the time. And I don't mean to knock on Zoloft. I know it works for a lot of people, and a lot of people swear by it. And I'm not an anti-pharmaceutical kind of person at all, but it just really did not work for me at all. It was worse than, it made things worse. And so
I think a lot of creative people would have a problem with that kind of medication also.
Yeah, I felt really foggy. I was tired all the time. I was taking like 3-hour naps every day, and I didn't have time to be doing that. And so I was really needing something. I also had, I was trying to stay faithful to the meditation practice and keep that up, and that was good. But I started microdosing psilocybin. I didn't do it every day, but it was kind of like on an as-needed basis. I'd just take one little capsule, so you wouldn't be enough to even know that I'd taken anything. I wasn't hallucinating, or it was that subtle. And it's amazing what that was doing for me. So I was kind of able to go on. It's kind of the idea behind Zoloft, like it makes you able to function in your life. And so I swear by that in combination with mindfulness or some kind of meditation practice and exercise, and that saved me. I still do like a full-on journey every now and then, especially when I'm feeling, I don't know, stuck, or if there's like, I tend to get kind of in mental and emotional ruts where it's like, why do I feel this way? I don't know. It's just because I've been feeling this way for a while now, and so I just keep feeling this way. And it's that kind of constricted, very narrow, not expansive mind state. And that does not lend itself well to any kind of creativity or joy in life. So once in a while, I'll just do a full journey and see how I can get kind of blasted out of that rut for a little while.
Yeah, that's great. I think this is a very good time to talk about the opening track on the record, Alive, right? I'm gonna quote a lyric here. I lick the plate, we drop inside, and everything true, it comes alive. This line jumped out at me. First of all, it seems like a direct reference to one of those psychedelic experiences, and the sounds and vibe of the song reinforced that for me. But also, as some of the first lyrics on the record, it seems you are inviting us along on this trip, that the record is the journey of the songs that kind of represents this period in your life.
Totally.
Can you talk about this song and how this happened?
Yeah, that's, you're the first person to call me out on a drug reference. But yeah.
I've had some experience in the field.
The song, the idea is like, putting down old habits. Like you say you want to kill your thirst, but the flask is cracked. It's like the old thing that I've been trying to do, the drinking away of the problems, has not been working. Also, it's sort of a Buddhist reference, that idea of like when we're trying to get to an end goal, it seems we never really reach it. But if we can just be here now and like focused on the present moment, that's when everything kind of opens up to us. The present moment is bottomless, it's infinite, but the future like just never really arrives. The vessel that we try to contain it in just is cracked. You can't do it. You can't get that goal. You can't reach that end goal. So it's like a shift in attitude and perspective. Instead of drinking from the cracked flask, let's lick the plate and see what happens. Yeah, go for the ride. Try something new. I'm not saying that it's like it's going to cure everyone's ills. Like it's still, it's still the human journey, the messy process of being alive. But at least it's like I feel alive.
Yes. After enlightenment, what is it? Wash the dishes, do the laundry, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
You say you wanna kill your thirst, but the flask is cracked. How you ever gonna quench it like that? So I lick the plate, we drop inside, and everything true, it comes alive, it comes alive, comes alive, comes alive, comes alive. And love says go, so I go. Love says speak, though your words come slow.
What about the sounds of this song, kind of the psychedelic vibe to it? How did that come together? How did that happen?
That was mostly Jerry Miller's idea, my guitar player from way back. He and I have been playing together for so long. He was on my first album and all the ones in between too. And
he's a pretty amazing player.
Yeah, he's amazing. He can play anything, and we work so well together. We never talk about things. We don't like consciously decide I want it to be like this, and so I think you ought to do this, and, or he never checks in with me like, is this what you're going for? We just, we read each other's minds, I think. So, yeah, he went for it with the backwards guitar at the end of the album, that psychedelic sound. He was like, I want to do this thing. And I was like, okay, do it, whatever. And I'm sure it'll be great. And it was, the perfect sound, and we'd never done that before on any of our albums. So
that first and the last song to me are kind of a pair in terms of the psychedelic sound of them, or kind of the journey of the record.
Yeah, totally. And they both were songs that didn't have much of a structure. Like I went into the studio not knowing what would go where. I just kind of had like a vague idea about them, about how I wanted them to kind of sound or what groove I wanted. And they were both done in like, I don't know, one take, maybe two.
Wow.
And I was talking to the band in the headphones like, okay, all right, let's like make it intense here. And they were like, what is she talking about? Okay, I'll do something.
And that's what ended up on the record.
Yeah, I like
that
it.
take.
I like keeping it that way. Like I like things to not be, you get to overthinking the studio a lot of times, and not knowing the song really helps you to not overthink it.
Well, also having a band that you've worked with for so long makes that work too, right?
Yeah, exactly. They're so intuitive. It's amazing.
Yeah.
You have to start at the bitter end, the bitter end, the bitter end.
Let's talk about the song Winnemucca, a great name to bring into the world of cool places in songs like Tucumcari, Muskogee, Amarillo, right? But for me, the real hook of the song is the repeated line at the end of each section with that great harmony and the resolution on the repeat of the line. Can you talk about how this song came about and maybe when you came up with that idea to repeat that line?
Yeah, so the song came about, it was just after the divorce was finalized, and I was feeling kind of a lot of mixed emotions. I was also feeling mainly really restless because it was early 2021, and so it's still very much like pandemic world, and I hadn't really traveled much, so I got in my car and did this like solo little adventure. It was kind of like a way of saying, it was like ushering in a new era for me to do that. And one of the places I went from Boise was Winnemucca. It was just me in the desert and all these kind of like joyful fantasies about what my new life was going to be like. And I'd started dating the person who I'm now engaged to, and so he's woven into that song. And the idea, I guess, behind it is like, there's like a loneliness to it, but there's also this like newfound freedom and joy and defiance. And I kept thinking about Jeffrey Foucault has an album called Ghost Repeater. And I've always loved that phrase, ghost repeater, and was sort of fascinated by what that meant. And I guess it's like a repeater radio station that isn't really manned by anyone. It just kind of sends out the signal from a computer that it's told to.
Yeah.
And so I kind of felt like for many years that's what I was. I was like a ghost repeater, and I was trying to work that image into the song without ripping him off. So the chorus came, I'm a lonely station. And that's the station I had in mind, like a radio station. I'm a lonely station in the desert tonight. Splice my wires, I want to get electrified. It's like, it's like this desire for like a new kind of life. It's like vivid, electrified. Splice my wires, I want to get electrified. Plug me into your neon signs, because Winnemucca has so many cool old vintage like casino signs. I love the neon in Winnemucca.
Is that Nevada?
Yeah. So gambling is all over the place there in Winnemucca, and it has this Wild West feel, and it was such a fun place to be at that particular time in my life. And then I want to blast my love, let it amplify. Blast my love, let it amplify. Like I want to be a station now that's not a ghost repeater, but like I want to broadcast love. Like I want to be turned on in this way that I wasn't before, and like broadcasting something that's really meaningful to me, not just kind of going through the motions. So
it's quite a statement.
Yeah, it's like it's a manifesto in a way.
I'm a lonely station in the desert tonight. Splice my wires, I want to get electrified. Plug me into your neon sign. I want to blast my love, let it amplify. Blast my love, let it amplify.
I find you have a really effective range of vocal styles. One thing I noticed on this record, I hear a subtle difference sometimes in the way you deliver song that has tension in it lyrically about the difficulties of your life, like You Were a Friend of Mine or The Bitter End, versus a song like Winnemucca or Crooked River, where there's like a peacefulness or maybe an acceptance in your vocal tone or the delivery of the song versus the tension that might show up in some of these others. It really works so well. Is this something you think about it, or is it more natural after writing and singing so many songs that your delivery just naturally fits the tone or the message of the songs?
I don't really think about it. No, I if I did start to think about it, I'm afraid of what would happen.
I'm sorry I brought it up.
No. I mean, like in the studio, I've never been trained at all vocally. I have no formal training, so I don't really know what I'm doing.
But it seems to work out for you.
Oh, thanks. I take heart in the fact that a lot of my favorite singers were not formally trained. And I guess I kind of like fumbling around on my own, and I'll sing a song and just think like, okay, well, I guess this is working, and I'll hear it back in the studio, and sometimes I can change little things. But for the most part, I just kind of do what I do. And often I'll think I'm singing in one way, like I'll think, wow, I'm really like giving it my all. This sounds really intense in my ears. And then I'll listen back in the studio and be like, oh, it just still sounds like lazy me. Like my vocals always sound lazy to me. So I've just kind of come to accept that, like, well, unless I want to start taking vocal lessons, that's just how I'm going to sound. And I'm undisciplined, so I'm just going to keep it with what I've got and hope for the best.
Let's work particularly in this record. I really, really enjoyed the vocals. I want to talk about one more song, Outsiders.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's fascinating that this book, S.E. Hinton book, written in the 1960s by, I think, like a 16-year-old, right?
Mm-hmm.
and the movie from the 1980s have had such a life that these stories still resonate. I guess it has resonated with you because you wrote this song inspired by this book or movie, right? Can you tell us about what moved you to write this one?
I saw the movie on an airplane recently. Well, I guess it was a couple years ago now. I hadn't seen the movie since when it first came out in the 80s.
Yeah.
I was like maybe 8 when I saw it, or 7. I was shocked to realize that I still remembered every scene. I remembered every line.
Wow.
So it was this kind of like eye-opening experience. I realized, like, oh my God, this thing is so deeply embedded in my psyche. I didn't even realize it. And I had read the book,
Just for the
too.
record, I don't think this movie was intended for a 7-year-old.
No, it really wasn't.
Okay.
I should not have been watching that movie.
Okay.
I also read the book. I was obsessed with it. I loved it. I think that it was formative for me. I think that it's partly why I love, it's such a slice of like true Americana. The greasers and the socias and classes warring with each other.
Yeah.
But also, like, I learned I think from that book, I've always loved the underdog. I've always liked the puppy with the, like, weird patch over his eye, or like the one that's sort of like beat up a little bit.
The runt.
Yeah, the runt. And then it kind of made me think that, like there's something out there. There's like it's an aesthetic. It's really hard to put my finger on, but the kind of underdog that writes poetry that's also really gorgeous, like that to me became the ideal person.
Yeah.
Who like hops freight trains, but then goes to save children from a burning building. So I don't know. I think it warped me and my sensibilities, but I don't regret it. It's a beautiful book, beautiful story.
So this would have been one of those concept songs where you thought, I want to write a song with this idea in mind.
Exactly. Yeah. Like I wanted to write about. I felt like that book / movie. That it needed its own homage from me, because I realized that it is such a part of me that it kind of influenced my later actions in ways I didn't even realize. And so, yeah, that's what it was like. I want this song to be about this, and that's what I went for.
Who was I supposed to be? Anybody else but me? Ditch the poetry of Johnny K, the cigarettes and the switchblades. Who was I supposed to be? If only someone could see the gold that lies beneath. Oh, but I do. Yeah, I do. And it's the hardest to keep. So when it fades, don't you weep. But I do. Yeah, I
All right, Eilen, we've been at this a little while. I want to ask you one more kind of big picture question, if we can. We've talked about the journey you've been on that resulted in this record. If you look back at your entire journey as a musician, creative person, songwriter, is there something you think you've gotten better at over that time, or maybe something you're working towards in terms of your creative life?
I think I've gotten better at talking to people. I don't know. I guess you'd be the judge, maybe.
It's been going all right.
I have ways to go, obviously, but I was just so shy at the beginning of my career. I didn't want to talk to people on stage. Like my stage banter was awful. I mean, it still is sometimes. I'll have like, anxious nights and I freeze up there and I don't know what to say and it comes out super awkward. But you know what? I think part of it is that I had to see myself as someone who has a seat at the table. Like I'm a grown up now. I can have conversations with people and, it's terrifying, but let's do this, Like at some point you have to join the world and talk to people, and whether that be on stage or after the show or, or in interviews. And it's really become, like I said earlier, like my favorite part now. So that's an area of growth. I wouldn't have done that. I don't think if it weren't for music, I would have stayed even more shy than I am.
Yeah, that's great. Well, thanks very much, Eilen, for taking the time and also for being so generous with your thoughts about this journey you've been on and talking about these songs in such a great way. These are very personal stories, so I'm glad you're able to spend this time and share your thoughts so generously with us.
Oh, thanks for having me. Thanks for chatting.